Okay, I think we're going to get started. So welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you here. We have a great panel today. I'm going to get right into it so that we can use the time for discussion. I will just briefly introduce who we have. To my left is Rohit Agarwal, who's the General Manager of K-12 Education for Amazon. We have Jim Federico, who's the Principal Product Manager at Microsoft. We have Sujit Nair, who is the Director of Engineering for Edmodo. And we have Devin Vodicka, who is a Superintendent at Vista Unified School District here in San Diego. So today we're going to be talking about the Go Open work that's going on. And I'm going to introduce it, and then I will ask some questions of each of our panelists about their involvement in it. So Go Open is an effort by I am the Director of the Office of Educational Technology at the U.S. Department of Education. The Go Open movement is efforts that we are making to increase the use of openly licensed educational resources in K through 12 schools. And right now, there are 14 states who are Go Open states who've taken on a commitment to have OER be a core part of their content strategy when it comes to K-12 education. And there are 60 school districts involved. And we have two kinds of school districts involved. We have what we call Go Open launch districts, which are districts who commit to replace one textbook over the next 12 months with OER. And then we have Go Open ambassador districts. And those are districts who've done this before, and they assist and mentor the districts who are learning how to do it for the first time. And then they're organized regionally around the country. We're really trying to accomplish three things. We are trying to create more proof points. We find that in higher education, everyone knows what openly licensed resources are, and we're seeing huge impacts in higher ed. Students are saving millions of dollars collectively. There's Z degrees, which are degrees where the textbooks don't cost anything. Major impact. But in K-12, it's just not well known. So we're trying to collect the existing proof points and create more proof points so that people can see how this can work at scale. So not in a single classroom, but at the district level. We're also trying to create some guidance on how to do it. There's not a lot of guidance for K-12 around these issues. And then the third is we're trying to make sure that the infrastructure is in place that supports it. And that's why these gentlemen from these companies are involved, because they represent infrastructures that schools use every day. And we want to make sure that it's compatible with this kind of use. There's lots of chairs up here for you in the back if you want to sit down. Or if you're not quite sure if you're going to stay, then keep standing back there. So why are we doing this? Number one, we feel like openly licensed educational resources have huge potential. They can be up to date. They are much more flexible than a static textbook. They are legal to share and modify. There are many, many teachers in this country who probably break the law every day just to teach their class in the way that they feel is most effective, because they're picking and choosing and finding the best stuff, and they're copying it off the internet, and they're just sort of doing it. And we would like to make them all honest citizens once again, and make sure that they have a legal way of getting the very best resources for their students. We also want them to be able to be the creative professionals that they came into the teaching profession to be, rather than just taking sort of a textbook and sort of reheating that frozen dinner for class. They can actually create a custom meal for their students with either creating or curating OER resources. And then OER has the possibility of customization and accommodation for students as well. They're very flexible in that way. As far as why now, $8 billion is spent every year on classroom materials, including textbooks. That's a massive amount of money. Just say that to yourself, $8 billion. We have many, many grant programs in the Department of Ed. We can't just throw $8 billion at anything. So if we can repurpose $8 billion for more effective means, then we are excited to do that. The second reason I think now is the right time is with the new state standards, there's now a target that you can shoot at. So in the past, everyone just did their own thing. Now with a well-known standard, it really opens up the teaching approach. So it allows for more flexibility for the teacher to do something that she feels is right for her class. and that allows for new possibilities. And then lastly, the infrastructure is drastically changing in K through 12. In the last 2 years, there are 20 million more students with access to broadband in the classroom than just 2 years ago. And we are on pace by 2018 to have virtually every classroom with broadband access available to it. That's an incredible change in the infrastructure in our classes. It's an invisible change, so we don't hear a lot about it. But we now have a true digital platform for this kind of work. So with that, I want to start with Devin, who's been a pioneer in using OER. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your Tri-State Open Education Collaborative. It sounds incredibly ambitious. I wondered when you first told me about it, why would you do this? Why would you try to cross state lines with curriculum? That's not very easy. And what makes it worth the trouble?
Right. That's good questions. So it was about a year ago that I was at a League of Innovative Schools meeting, and we have many league superintendents here now. And we were doing kind of a design thinking workshop about competency-based education. And we were talking about how can we really move the needle with a competency-based approach. And we came up with all kinds of ideas, and eventually a couple of us got tired of just talking about it. We said, what we really need to do is something that's actionable. We have to implement these ideas, learn from the implementation, and then adjust. And so I happened to be sitting next to Matt Miller. He's the superintendent from Mentor Public Schools in Ohio, and Pat DeClotz from Kettle Moraine in Wisconsin. And the three of us said, we're going to get our teams of teachers together, and we're going to implement a blended learning, interdisciplinary, project-based, competency-based, open educational resources unit, and we're going to do it right away. And so it is a little crazy to come up with ideas like that, but I think we need that kind of audacious idea to show the potential of what we can do now. And what we had in common was we were all Google districts, so we had a common infrastructure. We're all digitally advanced in the sense of kids have devices and resources, and then we have common standards now. So we identified some teachers and schools and brought them together. We have Elise Oshendesco, she's the principal of Roosevelt. Her school was involved in this. And really, from the beginning, when we talked to people, we got great advice from Joseph and others who said, you need to be thinking about how this will scale. And if you're thinking about collaboration and scaling, if you do anything that's too proprietary, that will limit future growth. And so that was a real insight for us, that collaboration and open are hand in hand. And the more that you want to collaborate, the more that you have to embrace open resources. There's Pat DeClotz, by the way.
Can you raise your hand, Pat? So she's one of the 3 districts who's participating.
Right.
And she's proud of it. That's why she's raising her hand really high.
That's exactly right.
There we go.
So anyway, we turned our teams loose on this, and they created units where students had a lot of voice and choice, and it was about how people affect the land and how land affects the people. And you had students in San Diego area, Vista, collaborating with students in Wisconsin and Ohio, all using these open resources and then showcasing what they did. And at the end of it, we had just a tremendous response from our community. And I heard feedback from students. I had one middle school student who said this was the first time he felt smart, which was sad that he didn't feel that way before, but the openness of it, the collaboration, the authentic audience was really powerful for him. And student after student after student said it was the hardest thing that they had done, and they couldn't wait to do it again. And so, but in terms of openness, I think the really key insight was collaboration and openness have to go together. The more that you choose these proprietary tools, the less that you can dream of or implement a project like this.
Great. So Rohit, I go around the country and everybody tells me what we really need is an Amazon for educational resources. We need to be able to find them and rate them and review them and know what the best stuff is. And so when we first talked and found out that you indeed were thinking about that, we were pretty excited. I think, though, for a lot of people, they might wonder, why would Amazon suddenly show up in this place? I mean, you are known for shopping, you're known for media, but education is sort of a new area for you. And in addition to sort of coming into this world, you're coming in from this point of view of openly licensed educational resources. So I think you're surprised on the left hand and surprised on the right. So why is this a good starting point for you?
So it's an interesting question, and yeah, you remind me of the time about a year and a half ago when we were sitting in one of your offices of the Department of Education when you floated the idea of, we need an Amazon.com for all these free and open educational resources, and we were like, well, it kind of makes sense for one company to build that then. So we started digging deeper into it, and Amazon's been a leading provider of curriculum resources for both colleges and schools anyway, right? It's always been paid books in ebooks format, print format, and what have you. So it's not entirely new, but when we ventured into deeper into the K-12 education space, we're just looking to leverage the expertise, the domain knowledge, and the technical expertise that we have. So you talked about Amazon's known well for our shopping experience. I would challenge us to think about when we, and we love supporting the crazy ones, right? So when you think about, when you think about scale, when you think about openness, so let's assume that there's 3.5 million teachers in the country and everybody was to contribute 5 or 10 of the resources that are sitting on their laptops, for example, right? Now you have 35 million, if I do my math right, resources sitting around in a single repository. How do you find the right one? Discoverability becomes a huge problem, right? Ratings and reviews becomes a huge problem, right? Scale, of course, becomes a huge problem. And then you have challenges with how do you associate one thing with another, and all those things can come with it. As I'm describing these, you should be thinking about, well, we kind of already do that in retail, right? It's something that is core to Amazon. So we already have the technology to not only build the infrastructure that we're hoping to partner with all the players here, and bring our expertise to the table, but also it's something we know how to do really, really, really well. The only difference, and it's a little tiny difference if you look at it, is there's no buy button. Right? It's all free. So the question we get is, why would you enter when there's no money to be made? And it's the right thing to do. If there's one thing I would say about Amazon is we're extremely customer focused, right? So in this case, when we think about the teaching and the student community as our customers, the right thing to do is to enable every teacher when he or she enters the classroom that they are empowered with the collective knowledge and insights of every one of their peers who are teaching the same topic or the same subject or the same grade. And we believe that using Amazon technology and what we've done with seller services and what have you, we can help develop solutions that bring that power to the teacher, and that's the right thing to do for the customer. And if we don't monetize it, that's okay.
Great. So Sujit, I know you already have a platform where you claim millions of users. It's well known and it's well used. Why bother to focus on OER? You already got a going business and paying customers. What makes this motivating and important from your point of view?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as opposed to like Amazon and Microsoft who are big companies, we are still at a startup stage. So we have to think hard whether it's the right thing to do before even jumping into it. So the answer, at least from my perspective, is very simple. Edmodo currently is just playing to its core strength, which is the global education network we have. And let me try to put it in the OER context. So the mental model which I want the audience to have is how Edmodo is using its education network to tackle 2 pillars which are necessary for a content platform to be successful. One is the quantity side, and the other is the quality side. So since 2008, teachers have shared and uploaded more than 500 million resources on Edmodo. And when we did some number crunching, a vast majority of them are actually OER content. It's just that teachers have been adding it to their Edmodo libraries and privately sharing it with other teachers. And the Go Open initiative right now, the timing is really right because it helps Edmodo bring in some formality into the process, because teachers worry a lot about trademark issues, licensing issues when they think about sharing a content and making it public. So the Go Open initiative that in that sense has helped us a lot, especially with Creative Commons licensing attached to a content when it goes public. So that's the quantity side of things. And for the quality side, we know again from data and from numerous user research events which we have done at Edmodo that the signal to noise ratio in the OER world is extremely low. Teachers don't like consuming content which hasn't been vetted by other teachers. And they really hate it when they go and search for a simple term like fractions or mitosis, and then we throw hundreds of results at them. Back in February, we had a Go Open event at Skywalker Ranch in which all of us were present, and we had meetings with curriculum specialists from 3 different states, Georgia, California, and Utah. Just in 2015, Georgia spent 180 grand on 50 contractors to do the content curation for OER. California hired 5,000 teachers to do the same thing. And if you look at the tool which Utah is using to do ratings and reviews, it looks like a website built in the 90s. It's extremely difficult to use, and it's very time consuming. And after putting all these effort, all 3 of them said their yield rate is not more than 4%. Mm-hmm. So out of every 100 content which a content creator makes, only 4 passes the quality bar. And that's where the Edmodo brings its magic, which is its global network. The moment a teacher uploads a content, within like a few days, you have ratings and reviews from teachers across the globe on how effective the content was in their classroom setting. So they actually try it out in their classroom. And we don't stop at teachers. We actually welcome and allow students to rate and review content. They get points and badges for doing that. And you get the complete rubric score for a particular content. Like kids tell us, oh, wow, whether it was engaging, whether it was fun in their classroom. And if you see it from that perspective, OER fits completely in Edmodo's vision. And the core vision of Edmodo has always been to connect people with the resources and people they need to be successful in life. And Spotlight helps with that. And let me just conclude with a kind of personal story. When I was growing up in India, next to my home was this very good library with lots of cheap and high quality books by this publisher called Nair Publishers. So converted to today's dollars, it would roughly be like 25 cents per high quality book. And there was a whole generation of Indians who grew up with books made by Nair Publishers. And you know what? My school was just a block away from Dharavi, which is very popular now because of Slumdog Millionaire. And I have personally seen the benefits of having very easy access to high quality and cheap resources. And to me personally, Spotlight is very exciting because it's kind of a payback time for me.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So Jim, I know you've been working with, partnered with OpenEd.com to create an app that helps teachers find and assign OER in any LMS, and which is really cool. But on the surface, that doesn't really seem to benefit Microsoft directly. And Microsoft often acts in its own benefit, like every other company. So it feels a little bit odd that you're out here in this area basically helping everybody else out. Yeah. What led you to make that investment? And why is it meaningful to Microsoft if it's happening outside of your own products?
Yeah, we were ultimately just responding to a number of teachers and educators' feedback to us that they wanted help getting connected to open educational content. So I found a company that I thought was doing it particularly well, worked with them to build an LTI app that could then be embedded in any learning management system to have access to a little over 1 million educational resources, including assessments and games, content videos and so forth. So it was a fun project. It didn't take too long. And we learned a ton in the implementation, and we've got a lot of feedback from educators. Ultimately, of course, our goal is to connect Microsoft Classroom and Microsoft Office to quality content and connect that to teachers. That's the stated strategy. That's our objective. And we're focusing a lot on open educational resources, primarily because that's been the feedback from the educators to us. They have a lot of content in their drawers, often in the junk drawer, sometimes on a laptop, sometimes on an iPad, and ultimately we want to be able to harvest all that and to have it scale, help the teachers scale to the extent that they couldn't on their own. And so Office brings the ability to help the teachers scale.
Great. So, Devin, some people describe OER as free like a puppy instead of free like a beer. And there's this thought that people are like, oh, we're going to save so much money. But I have never talked to anybody who was in the process of creating and curating and having high quality OER who said it was free.
Right.
So are you saving money?
Yeah, also a good question. I hadn't really considered it in the context of puppies and beers, but I think, for me, the driver to pursue open educational resources, it gets back to why you said the U.S. Department of Ed is thinking now is a good time. It has to do with quality and relevance and the adaptability, the flexibility. I don't pursue it because I think there will be a cost savings, although I do suspect that over time you may hit a point at which it actually is cheaper than the existing model. I think in the transition, a superintendent thinks about all of the other costs. So in our project, which I forgot to mention, is called the COW project. It's a terrible name, but you can blame Matt Miller for that. California, Ohio, Wisconsin, COW.
So is that the Go Open Cow?
Yeah. So in this project,
is Chick-fil-A a sponsor?
No. We will talk to them. Anyway, there are other costs. You're paying for teacher time. You're paying for sometimes the technology, the hardware that you need to connect the students. So in the transition, I don't think you save a whole lot of money. Over time, I'm confident that the quality will go up thanks to a lot of the tools that are out there. And the efficiencies will also be much better, again, because we'll have better tools to do the curation and the sorting and the identification. And I think about it a lot like, if I'm a betting person and I'm going to make a bet on, the model that we've had in the past, which is static, fixed print materials or more dynamic, open, crowdsourced materials, I have to think that long-term the bet is on the open, dynamic, crowdsourced materials. I trust the wisdom of the hundreds of thousands of teachers in the country a lot more than I trust any one or two providers. And so for me, the motivation is more about quality experiences for kids and improving learning. And if, down the road we achieve some savings, that will be an even better benefit, but it's not the primary driver for me.
So I know there's a school district in, I believe it's Lawrence, Kansas, where they are paying, from money that they saved from buying textbooks, they've reinvested that in teachers, right? And they're paying their teachers as much as the football coach to create and curate and maintain the OER that they're using in their district.
Yes.
Are you finding that, I've also heard people say, how can you possibly add one more thing to the teacher's plate?
Right.
I mean, these are the most stressed out, overworked people on the planet, possibly.
Right.
And like now, hey, guess what? You get to also make your own stuff. How are your teachers reacting? Are they excited? Are they getting paid more than they get paid day to day?
Yeah.
Are they stressed out?
These are great questions, and I think this has been one of the reasons that OER has not moved as fast as some people think, is that you have to take something off of the plate in order to put something on sometimes. But we've had so many transitions in the past few years. We have new content standards, we have new accountability systems, we have new funding models. The infrastructure is dramatically improved. We're in a lot of transitions, and in that transitional space, we've really taken advantage of the creative opportunities to explore lots of resources that are out there, and our teachers have responded very favorably to that. Initially, we would bring teams together, and they would do it in groups and identify some materials and then push them out to other teachers. And now we're seeing that that model is being replicated at a school level or within schools. So I think that teachers are motivated frequently by similar things as what I described. They're trying to best serve their students' needs, and they see that students need meaningful, relevant content that's going to engage the kids. And when they don't use those kinds of resources and they revert back to the static materials, there are other consequences for teachers that are not fun either. So I'm seeing that we're getting close to a tipping point where use of this more open fluid model is more of the norm and less the exception. And I think, again, as the tools get better, as the resources get better, the efficiencies are improved, it will make it even more compelling for teachers to be drawn to these open resources. So I feel like we're on a good path and getting close to a tipping point.
So I know, as I mentioned before, in higher education, we're seeing a lot of impact, but this is like a really different universe. K-12 procures differently, the way the money flows is different, the barriers are different. I guess my question is, how relevant will this be? Is this a fad that's going to go away? Will people like mess around with OER for a while and then go, that sounded like a good idea, but it really wasn't? And with any innovation, things have to be in place for them to sustain, right? And if those don't happen, even a really great innovation cannot take hold. I have a few Betamax tapes. I'm kind of sad about that.
Ouch.
So the question is, do you feel like this will be relevant in 5 years or 10 years? And what are the things that must happen for this to be relevant in 5 or 10 years? And this is really open to anyone.
So I'll take a stab at it. I think this is a natural evolution, because if you think about ultimately who benefits, it's the students, right? And if you think about the digital natives that are entering the school system today, and kids that are even in middle school or high school today that are pretty much spending more time on their phones than we'd like them to, the reality is they're expecting more engaging content. So the idea of a static piece of resource is good for instructional materials, but the students who are ultimately the customers of all of our efforts will require that we have materials that are engaging, that are proven, that are interactive, and what have you. And nobody knows how to do that than teachers, right? So the idea of teachers being able to create materials that they see valuable for their students ultimately is the right path, and I think it'll last for a long, long time. Second, I think there are barriers that we need to overcome, and I think you've got a very valid point. We could have the best OER materials created, but if it doesn't find the right distribution, if it can't be discovered, which is the reason Amazon, and I know Microsoft is excited about this, is because ultimately what we want to do is say, well, if you are a power teacher in Kansas and you create a great lesson plan or a great project-based learning exercise, and you know that this was used by 13,000 of your peers across 42 states, that gives you the momentum to keep creating more. You need that. None of that will happen when Sujit talks about 400 million resources. Well, good luck trying to find the right one, right? If it was all in the Google universe. I'm not using Google's name because they're not represented here, right. But we all use them for search. But the point is, ultimately, teachers, to your point, trust the content created and vetted by other teachers. And you need infrastructure, you need platforms so they can discover that content, to be able to rate it, to be able to review it, and to be able to protect it. So for example, one of the things we've learned in the retail space is when you open the market up for crowdsourcing, what we call seller services, you get tons of really smart people who try and figure out how to take your web traffic and direct them to their own sites, right? So anytime you have a live conversation, you see somebody trying to insert a URL and certain phrases and what have you. You have to protect against all of this for this to take off. Otherwise, part of what happens is it becomes, I'm not going to go to this platform to go search for content, because 90% of it is noise, right? So there's investments that one needs to make in technologies to bring that to be real. Right. And I think that's where, with the likes of Microsoft, Edmodo, Amazon, helping build the tools and the infrastructure so Devin and the different cows around the country can couldn't resist, can benefit from this. I think it's going to be an exciting partnership and a good road ahead.
Yeah, let me also add, so I think the other point which also needs to be considered is actually the feedback loop which goes. Whether you are on the content creator side or on the content consumer, I mean, there has to be a very solid incentive structure in place. For example, if you have made a content and if you get a notification next day saying, hey, your content has been consumed by millions of students across the globe, and here is how your content has bumped up their learning scores, whether it be English reading comprehension or math scores or whatever, that's a very solid incentive structure for our teachers. When we talk to teachers, many of them don't really care about gift certificates or money, but the fact that you have such a solid emotional satisfaction which you get by impacting lives. So that feedback loop, both going back to teachers, going back to parents, I mean, needs to happen for this to sustain in the long term. Without that, I think it's very difficult to do.
But I think of OER in a broader context of essentially digitizing the classroom. And if you put sort of the classroom next to other industries, you put education next to other industries, education is sort of the last one to be fully digitized. And the key that I think will come out of digitizing the classroom, which requires, of course, digitizing the content, is we'll have much better feedback and the ability to personalize instruction to get the highest outcome possible, for every single student. And that's what we're most excited about.
I was just going to say, I feel like this is reminiscent of when we were having discussions years ago about encyclopedias. And, are we going to stick with these print materials that are trusted and known? And there were questions about Wikipedia and why, is that sustainable? It's volunteers that are contributing, and there's all kinds of noise in it, and some of it is not valid. But how many encyclopedia publishers are still in business now? The model has changed. And I think there's something, kind of getting back to the teacher part of it, something about the human condition that we're naturally interested in creating and contributing. Yeah. And you see that with something like Wikipedia. You see that in these open ecosystems for resources that are being provided. Why do teachers upload content to Edmodo and Microsoft and all these other platforms? It's a sense of wanting to contribute and impact more lives, and so I think that human condition to want to be part of that creative process, coupled with all of these tools, it's inevitable to me that we're going to end up in this open space, and it's just a question of when.
So that brings up, I think, a really interesting question. There's obviously no publishers on stage here, and there probably are a few publishers who may not see the future the way we're seeing it. So I guess the question is, do you feel like publishers should they be afraid of OER? Is it threatening to them? Can they coexist? Is there a role for publishers as we know them in this future that you're describing?
So I would say that I think the role of publishers to create a textbook series that stays in place for 7 years without any modifications, that era I think is dead. But I do think there is a role for anyone who can create great content that can drive learning. And so my view is that that's going to be much more specialized, and that we're going to see more niche products, something that's really good at a very particular standard or learning outcome. But I don't think we're going to see, in my view, these publishers that have a program that is expected to meet the varied needs of all learners all the time. And I believe that in the education system, we're going to be pulling from lots and lots of different resources. Many of them will be these open resources that will be high quality and easier to access through these platforms, but we will still purchase items as well. So I do see them being complementary, but I think it'll be a different model, much more dynamic and much more specialized than it has been in the past. That's just my prediction.
And we work with publishers, obviously, right? Amazon's got a fabulous, great book business, and we work with almost every publisher out there. And I agree with you. Ultimately, I think there's, especially over the next 5 or 7 years, there's plenty of room for both to exist and benefit from each other. So the way I imagine the world, and we'll all learn over the next couple of years and how much it gets adopted, is when ultimately we're trying to bring power to the teacher so that he or she can select the right resources for the audience that she's trying to teach, right? And some of that resource may be available as a free or an OER resource, and some of it will come from the traditional publishers. And I think they will coexist. And I think ultimately, there's value if I'm a publisher, because as teachers discover free resources or OER resources, they will also find that there's other resources like paid resources out there that they could benefit from. In the past, a district would have to make a central decision on adoption for the entire district or school or what have you. I think this will change the model potentially, where the teachers will discover paid resources from the publishers in a simple way, and they may go to the district and say, we want the ability to buy it, even though it's not the prescribed collection, right, or the prescribed curriculum, if you will. So I think it goes both ways. If the publishers participate alongside OER, they may see that the ultimate goal of personalized education benefits the publishers as well.
I've got some faith in the publishers, Joseph. I work a lot with a number of publishers, and I think many have positioned themselves as open technology companies. The word publisher, the word book, isn't anywhere in sort of the boardroom conversation, and it's not where the majority of their R&D focus is. So I do have some confidence that the publishers will find a smart way to coexist in the space, and I think that'll happen.
Yeah, I do think the publishers will evolve. So right now on Spotlight, we have around 8,000 content creators, of which around 500 are publishers and the remaining are teachers. I actually recognize somebody with a Learn Zillion t-shirt. They have content on Spotlight. Next Lesson is another one. From the big names, it's Oxford University Press. And their story is slightly more interesting because what they realized is they have lots of textbooks which are outdated, but they immediately realized that there's a huge opportunity when it comes to using Edmodo as a distribution platform. So what they did was they hired hundreds of contractors in India, and they chopped all the nano quizzes at the end of these chapters and put them on Spotlight. So that's a very creative way with which they figured out. I mean, they figured out a good way to use Edmodo as a distribution platform using textbooks which they had, which was stale, but the questions at the end of chapters weren't.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So it sounds like in that case, they actually saw an opportunity to unbundle their content, sell it in a different way, and maybe increase their penetration of those pieces that required the particular expertise of like psychometricians and the things that publishers bring to the table that might be a little harder to find in an individual district.
Instructional design.
Instructional design, et cetera.
And they were based in UK, but they added all Common Core tags to it, so that they knew they're targeting the US market. So as Rohit says, I mean, they should see it as a good distribution opportunity and make use of it rather than be threatened and not evolve.
So Devin, does quality keep you up at night? I know there's a lot of concern that this could have come from anywhere. Who knows if it's correct? How do you while publishers making a textbook that doesn't change for 7 years, I don't think anybody thinks is a good idea. On the other hand, they have established vetting processes. They're very careful about employing experts. All their assessments go through extensive psychometric testing. You're kind of competing with that. Do you feel like you're up for that? Can you match that level of thoughtfulness?
Well, I think that's a really a valid concern, and we're very focused on helping our kids to be critical consumers of information because they're just flooded with all kinds of sources of data and information. And so I think our teaching staff and our school administrators, we all need to have that same mindset about being able to evaluate the quality of these resources. And that part is time consuming presently, but that's also where I see great potential with some of these tools as they get better and better, where it's easier to identify and locate and match the high quality content with the needs of a particular child at a given point in time. And so, I feel like that's part of the challenge that you get with this openness is that there will be noise, there will be static, there will be some materials that aren't so great. But I have to also trust that the teaching staff is looking at things with that critical eye, just like we want our kids to be doing that. And we'll probably make some mistakes along the way, and I hope that those are not so high profile that they detract from the broader opportunity and the benefits for kids. And to that end, I think having partnerships is really helpful. So I'm very grateful that the U.S. Department of Ed has taken a leadership role in this, And I have to say, to the industry partners, it means a lot for us to be able to say we're working with Microsoft and Amazon and Edmodo and these trusted names. And yes, there may be some bumps along the way, but we have a destination in mind, which is a really bright future for kids, and we're going to work through that.
Yeah, I don't think the quality thing is a real issue. I think ultimately in any crowdsourced, and I don't think crowdsourced is the right word, because we're not really sourcing from a nobody, right? You're sourcing from educated teachers who are actually creating these materials whether we like it or not, or Googling these materials whether we like it or not, and using it in their classrooms. We're providing a vetted resource repository, which I think is much better. Second, if you think of analogies, right? So we're at the Grand Hyatt. Typically, 5 years ago, if we wanted to have a dinner recommendation, you would go to the concierge, whose job was to find the right restaurants, and they had a list of menus and what have you. We don't do that anymore. We trust Yelp, which is exactly the same concept. We've gotten used to the fact that as long as it has more than 100, 150 reviewers and 4.5 stars or above, chances are it's a great experience. And we'll do the same thing here, right? It will start off with, one cow.
But we're headed to an entire herd.
But we think about 3 states and 3 districts like Devin's leading. We've got efforts from these teachers, but as you think about
need a better name for this project.
If there's one thing I contribute. So as you think about 3.5 million teachers contributing, right? The pressure on any single school or any single district gets reduced tremendously. Because as your teachers find resources for social sciences that you don't have to create, because you can benefit from what somebody in Alabama or in Texas has created, ultimately it all starts to work out. So I think it'll be only a matter of time, and it'll be months, not years, before the quality bar gets raised because of the sheer value provided by the ratings and the feedback systems.
Well, I do want to point out that kids are going to access materials on their own devices, on their own time, and really we need to teach everyone just to be smart about evaluating those resources. That ultimately is going to help us more than holding back, and so that's an important part of the conversation.
So on the one hand, it's exciting that you all are getting involved and you're doing this curation, because it's been a huge issue. But you could also flip around and say, is there a reason that we haven't been able to do this yet, right? Is there something systemic? Is there something about this area that makes it impossible to curate? Like as you come at it, like if this is the right answer, why hasn't it been done before, I guess is the question.
I think there's a number of ingredients that are falling into place now. You have bandwidth in the classroom. You have low-cost devices that are proliferating in the classroom. You have a set of standards that we can map the content to, which makes it more easily discoverable, and that so that teachers can find more relevance and have a better experience in discovering it. So really, just those 3 combined make for a pretty compelling case that now is the right time where OER will in fact be quite successful. And I think the work that you guys are doing around shedding a spotlight, shedding a spotlight on putting Edmodo's product on the equity issue, I think is a real problem. And I think there's a lot of big-heartedness in education that really wants to help solve for that problem.
So to create more equitable access to high-quality resources.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And Devin, go ahead.
No.
So Devin, like, do you is equity like one of your goals? Is there a measurable difference in the equitable access to high-quality resources in this approach than other approaches?
Yeah, I think equity is always at the forefront of our decision making, and again, it kind of circles back to one of my earlier points about collaboration and connectedness. But kids will have more equitable opportunities if they're connected to one another. So if we think about the variety of opportunities in Wisconsin and Ohio and California, one way to ensure equity is to have those kids working in teams with one another, so that they have some common experiences and they can learn from one another. And in order to do that, we have to embrace this connected, open kind of mindset as well. And so I think that the more that we can collaborate and connect, the better it will be in terms of ensuring equity and opportunities for all kids.
Great. Any last thoughts before we close?
Yeah, one last thought I had was, I think in the long term, we cannot be ignoring students. Because at the end of the day, for any edtech company, the main metric which needs to go to the top right is student learning. So in many ways, students are your consumers. And in the short term, yeah, we are doing all of these things, but in the long term, students will play a much bigger role than we anticipate right now, and we cannot just be ignoring it for too long.
So you're saying student not just as consumer, but as creator?
Yeah, but creators. And so if you look at a recent McKinsey report, right, on what attracts middle schoolers the most, are like very short 20, 30-second videos to learn stuff. Just go to YouTube and search for History of Japan. It's a very fun, like, couple of minute movie which somebody made, and you actually learn about Japan in a very non-pedagogical way. And if you want to keep student engaged, the content landscape has to change completely in the next 5 years. And right now, I don't think too many people are even thinking about it, and that mindset needs to change.
Comments, Jim? Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. We've got a ton of data on the drop-off rate with videos and courses, and there's about an 80% drop-off rate at 7 minutes. It doesn't matter if it's an 8-minute course or an hour course or a 5-hour course, there's an 80% drop-off rate at 7 minutes. It's almost absolute, and it crosses all grade levels, all subjects.
So the implication there is if we make our resources more modular, we may be able to increase overall engagement?
Yeah, and I have confidence that that OER producers will in fact build content at a smaller level of granularity to target one standard or a part of the standard, because that really enables teachers to differentiate the content, based on what they're seeing in the classroom, or platforms to automatically differentiate the prescription of content based on what they're seeing in the classroom. So part of this really has to be getting content down to a more manageable level, smaller.
All right.
I mean, ultimately, we're strong supporters of the Go Open movement, as you know. Our view is, in the long run, we want teachers to be empowered with the ability to use the content resources that they discover, whether created by their own district or elsewhere, so they could truly personalize the learning. Because we talk about personalized learning, but yet we expect teachers to do what we tell them to do, right? So I think part of the support for the Go Open movement, what makes it exciting for us is to enable every teacher to be able to discover the right resources for his or her students. And then as they see benefit from that, other teachers who are just like them can go benefit from that too. So it's truly a movement, right? Once it takes off and reaches a certain magnitude, I think we'll start to see this be the norm, and we can't wait for that day to come fast enough.
And neither can we. So if you are interested in becoming a Go Open district, we're still accepting districts into the Go Open movement. If your state is not a Go Open state and you think that they should be, feel free to put us in contact or reach out to them. We feel like we're right at the beginning of something. It's not often that the U.S. Department of Education gets involved this early in something. Normally we find great things that are out there and we start to amplify them. But for us, we feel like there was an urgency here and an opportunity here that was just unprecedented. When you see the impact, we stopped at a small district there. The whole district had 600 kids in the entire district, and they created their own science curriculum. It was based around smart grids. Those kids learned how to design smart grids, covered all of the science standards in doing so, and won a statewide STEM award. There's just not many things you can do in education that can lead to that kind of incredible change. And once they have those open resources, now another school can make their own science course based on smart grids and have that start of the other school to go with. So we feel like it's an area of incredible potential, and we'd love to bring you all along. Thank you very much.